in the future.
Time now to take a look into the future. And the way we shop is already evolving and quite rapidly. We've seen automated checkouts coming in where we can grocery shop instead of lining up and putting them on the conveyor belt. Probably many of us get our groceries delivered to our home, and supermarkets can track the purchase history of customers if you have a rewards card. The value of the currency is now data. What is retail likely to look like in the next year and beyond? How will technology change the way we shop? And what role will AI play? Well, joining me is Brian Walker, CEO and co-founder of the Retail Doctor Group. Brian, welcome to Nightlife.
Thanks very much, Mark. It's lovely to be here.
Why don't we break it up into different kinds of shops, I suppose?
Sure.
We'll begin with, I suppose, the most classic shop, the department store.
Sure.
Been around, well, I guess since the 50s is the heyday.
Absolutely.
What can we expect? Some would say the heydays of Myer and David Jones and companies like that are already behind us.
Well, I think the answer is actually probably to take one step into the broader universe.
Okay.
And in a way, this talks about the change of retail. And that is that technology is fueling great change. We as consumers now spend up to 3.5 hours per day on our smartphones. And I'll talk a little later about some of the other influences. But retailing's transforming because we now have an online offer. And in Australia, we now have globalization, many more competitors. So if you're running a department store, you've suddenly got the likes of Sephora, Uniqlo, H&M, in terms of physical and online competition. You've also got increasingly this very large legacy of retail stores, often locked into large rental deals with the landlords for long term. And globally, we're seeing the retail department store sector struggle. House of Fraser, the UK, comes to mind, JCPenney in the States, Macy's and so forth. And fundamentally, this is due to the fact that retail now is becoming more agile, more online research into physical stores. Retailers are adapting in many of the ways we'll talk about. Department stores are a little bit like big ocean liners in the harbour. They get you from A to B, and they've done a magnificent job over the years. But consumers want faster, quicker, more agile, and department stores are really struggling in that space. And of course, retailers around them are getting sharper and better at their offer. So you've got this perfect storm for the department store sector. Where do we see the world going? You know, our humble prediction is that the Australian market of 25, 26 million as it grows is not big enough with the online offer that's available to service two large retail department store chains in the way that we have. So we think we'll see some sort of consolidation merger. We'll start to see some closures of department stores, and we'll see downsizing and specializations in some of the formats within those department store businesses. We only have to look at Harris Scarfe. Just recently a department store channel, now regrettably into administration. Yesterday, the Deloitte people saying, look, we're going to start to downsize and see what's left as a saleable entity. That's a sign of the times.
And I suppose this has an impact as well beyond just the buying and selling element, because especially this time of year, at Christmas, department stores are a real fixture of the city. You know, everyone remembers going in to see the window displays in DJs, and the same is true in Macy's in New York and other places. Are they becoming less emblematic of the centre of a town?
What a great question. We will see transformation that I'm touching on, such that it's possible, of course, now to do all your Christmas shopping online and not physically visit a shop. So that, on aggregate, does play a part. The role of the department stores, particularly in the CBD locations, we think obviously has great legs to it or length to it. If we look around the world at department stores that are doing very well, tends to be the Harrods, tends to be the Lafayette in Paris, large CBD, large tourism, and large eatery and sort of broader experiences. So that emblematic CBD department store, we think, certainly has a future, but even that is changing in terms of format and size and so forth. It's more out in the suburbs and the broader stretch where it becomes less emblematic.
Let's turn now to the supermarket, your average supermarket. In Australia, obviously, we've long had what people call something of a duopoly in the supermarket arena, though there are emerging competitors of different types. Where do you see that industry going?
Well, it's also influenced by this topic today, Mark, of transformation, because what we see around the world is very much the growth of the Uber Eats, the service models, the fulfillment models. And that's definitely impacting supermarket shopping. As to is the same conversation about format sizes. So now as we see Woolworths and Coles opening their little metro CBD stores, and as the world becomes more urbanized, so by 2030, they're predicting that we globally will 65 to 70% of humans will live in cities. So the supermarkets are recognizing this. Smaller formats, fulfillment service, direct online ordering, of course, and they're accommodating their formats. The other thing that will happen in Australian supermarkets, of course, if we go back 10 years, to your point, 85 cents in every Australian supermarket spend and related merchandise was spent in either Coles or a Woolworths operation. Well, now we have Aldi. So Aldi are now our third on market share. They're at about 16% or thereabouts market share. An impressive operation. And in size of number of physical units will outstrip the others in time to come.
Really?
Yeah, simply because they're smaller formats and so forth. So what are we seeing for supermarkets? Well, in our research and our view, that trend of mobile consumers, agile, domiciled in cities, urbanisation, those trends are definitely influencing the supermarket sector. So more to shake up, Kauflands in the country, more will come.
What about these bespoke supermarkets? They're very small. They don't have a brand that you would associate with any kind of chain. They often will be called, organic or some kind of fresh supermarket. And the prices are often a very high price point. What's behind the appeal of these kind of fancy bespoke supermarkets?
Well, I think we're sharing your demographic here, because that's the market typically for high disposable incomes, premium. Certainly high street is invariably the space where they're not exposed to very large rentals. They're very niche. We certainly see a trend, particularly in millennial audiences. And millennials, by the way, in this next year will have the world's largest spending power. And you look to me, Mark, as though you are a millennial. So.
Guilty as charged, I suppose. I think I'm literally the first year of the millennials. I'm the oldest millennial there is.
Well, you will represent one of the largest spending powers. And so sustainability, environmental causes, rightfully so, organic produce. And these are typically niche offers now, and over time they'll become more commoditized.
How much does what we might call ethical consumption influence the way people shop?
Increasingly so. A lot of our insights are showing that sustainability, ethical consumption, environment, transparency of ingredients, understanding the retailer's supply channel, origin of product, are all rising now on the scale of importance in purchasing. What we also have to counter that slightly is the elasticity of price. In other words, increasingly we're prepared to pay more for that. And therein lies the differential.
Let's move to the way technology is affecting shops and the way we spend.
Sure.
Artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Now, one thing about AI that I think is sometimes difficult to understand is that it's often behind the way technology works without us even knowing it's there.
Absolutely.
What are some of the ways already that AI is influencing shopping?
Well, if you and I go on Google, for example, and it's about 80% of the global searches at the moment, or slightly higher, you'll see the top 3 or 4 choices available to you. It's a fundamental and rudimentary form of AI, because it's already tracked your history of tracking on that particular search.
Sometimes, though, it feels almost like a blunt instrument right now. If I buy an air conditioner, and then for the next 3 weeks I go on the internet and every ad I see is for an air conditioner, and you think, well, I'm the last person in the world who wants to buy an air conditioner right now. I just bought one.
Yeah. Look, if this was all about climbing, sort of the Mount Everest of technology, I'd say it's at base camp, to be honest. So, but it is interesting, because I think the point that we started to open up about in technology is that data is the currency. And when we look at the 5 big global networks of the world or companies of the world, the Facebooks and Apples and so forth, their fundamental market cap is predicated on data. And everywhere we go now, there is the ability for this machinery, for want of a better term, to track RFID, Wi-Fi, all these various technologies. And so increasingly, as the Amazonian type models come into the market and the Alibaba type models, data and knowing more about us becomes the valuable currency. And that then leads us to the area of prediction. And so artificial intelligence or machine learning is fundamentally, at a simple level, recording, capturing our movements, our purchases, our history, and then predicting, if you like, what we'll need. I mean, that's a very rudimentary view.
I used to work on a TV program called The Checkout, and one of the sayings we used to say around the office was, if you can't work out where the cost of something is, it means that you're the product. Do you think that's true?
Largely, I think that is true. I think it's a very clever way of saying it. It is true. And underpinning this idea of prediction is also our very habitual way of being. So, for example, we know that 50% plus of all consumer activity, particularly in commoditized markets, supermarkets, is repeat habitual business. In other words, we haven't changed our favourite brand of toothpaste for 6 months.
I know when I go to the supermarket, I can race around it in 5 minutes. I know where the same 15 odd things I buy every week are, and I go zip, 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 and I'm out.
Yeah. And I think what this gets to, interestingly, and we would call this the divide between shopping and buying. And this is what's fast approaching. Technology is enabling lower value commoditized items currently to be en masse delivered to one's home as it is. And if we look at the Amazonian model, 54% of Americans are on Prime, which is the subscription-based TV that leads or streaming service that links people into the Amazonian model.
Just to be clear, Amazonian model is, of course, Amazon,
yes.
the giant.
Yeah, yep. 60% of all e-commerce dollars are spent on Amazon. Now, as an organisation grows, and it's predicted to do about $23 billion in 12 to 14 years in Australia, having just recently started, this idea of us going to the supermarket to buy toothpaste, unless it's a particular destination, it could be ordered at home, ordered via that sort of environment or a Google-like environment, and delivered to us. So this is one of the big challenges facing the supermarkets and those sort of mass retailers, the role of technology and the way it's enabling personalisation.
You mentioned in that examples of a few retailers that have come to Australia in recent years and decades and gained a big sector of the market. Do you expect more giant retailer chains from maybe the US or the UK or other places to come to Australia?
Australia is a very contested retail market. It's also a very good destination globally because it's quite a closed economy or community in its own right. Certainly, we have very good retailers here as well. What we are seeing is that Australian retail is third behind Canada and the US for being slightly overshopped, more density per square metre. So as a consequence, we're seeing a shakeout in retail, and I'll come to your question. We're seeing a shakeout where a lot of some retailers have started to feel the effects of large chains not being able to innovate and adapt quickly enough and facing the difficulties. Bardot comes to mind, Co-op Bookshop comes to mind. On the other side of the scale, the H&Ms and the Uniqlos of this world have done particularly well in this country, and they are large mass players with a very good machine. Will we see more? Yes, we will see more over time, without a doubt. It's hard to nominate here today, but we know that we've got thereabouts 15% of the world's top 250 retailers, so there's more to come.
A lot of people, though, talk about independent retailers as something that they like shopping at, like to go to, especially with things like bookstores, record stores, or even just local milk bars and hamburger shops. They like to support independent businesses. That's never going to go away, is it?
Not if it's done well, and we've been involved with campaigns to support that very topic, Mark, because we also believe in the future of independent retail. And in a way, everything old is new again. So now we start to talk about these independent retailers with their uniqueness, their unique product offering, their own little database, the building of communities, and being just very, very good traders and retailers and merchants. That will never go away, but the pressure on those retailers is to do it even better than they did before.
I often think that one way we could support the small business sector in this country is to maybe provide services that help these smaller businesses that maybe don't have the capital of the big chains to modernise into the way people shop in terms of social media, online, all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. And I think also, they're the largest, retail is one of the largest employers in the country. The smaller shops, the independents, by definition, large employers. I'd also like to see support around small business setup, the training that you make reference to, the taxation, the wage levies that are placed on small retailers. I mean, opening Sundays is a very expensive exercise for many small retailers. And margins get thinner and thinner, gross profits and so forth, because there's much more pressure from these larger players. And there'll be more pressure to come in that whole shopping piece versus buying.
And what do you think of the downsides of this kind of modernisation? I mean, an obvious one might be you used to go into a shop, try on some clothes, you knew if they fit, and you're away. Whereas buying everything online, having everything sent to you, that person-to-person element is gone. What else are we losing?
Well, I think what I should say here is that whilst we've certainly portrayed the online piece and the technology fuel of it, Australian retail is about $325 billion in sales at the moment. And of that, on average, about 9% is done online, okay? The balance is done in the physical stores. Now, you always feel a bit like the person who said the Beatles would never make it, but we do see online starting to mature after many years of double-digit growth. And we do see a view that it'll cap out as an average at about 15%. Now, some retailers do more than half their business online, but many don't. And as a general rule of thumb, the more the relationship, the higher the expertise required, the more sort of reverence to the product, the more the physical environment comes to the fore. And we've grown up in the last few years talking about channels to market. Then there's been this great buzzword called omni-channel, which means a retailer needs to have physical store, online as well, and a good social media, but certainly the first two, so that they're open for business 24/7 around the world. Now we're increasingly talking about the fact that it's one brand and that these are the various expressions of the brand. And the fact is that we humanly, unless we have particular issues, we're social by instinct.
Yeah.
And we like the experience. We want the experience of touch, feel, and so forth. And therefore, these online pieces we're touching on really become augmenters to that, enablers to that even.
We're social creatures, and you go into a shop, especially for things, I'm thinking of things like wine, maybe plants at a nursery. They're things where the expertise of the person working in the shop is invaluable.
Absolutely. And so trust becomes a currency in that sense, Mark. And so some would say that, look, the retail that's under threat most of all is the boring physical retail.
Right.
That's the words that they would use. They'd say that, and one of the pieces that we look at in Australian retail, and we'd say that largely there's been an undercapitalisation in a lot of shop fit-outs over the years relative to global. And increasingly we see around the world retailers building less physical networks, much more flagships or brand ships with smaller units around them, and a good online offer as well.
Well, that's a very, very interesting insight into the future of shopping.
It's a fascinating topic. It really is, because it's all about change, it's all about consumer understanding, and it's all about technology. And, of course, being a great retailer.
Brian Walker, CEO and co-founder of the Retail Doctor Group. Thanks for being on Nightlife.
Absolute pleasure, Mark. Thank you.
We'll be back right after this.
On ABC Radio, it's Nightlife.